And so I will go ahead and introduce our therapists today. And I'll introduce them in the order in which they're sitting as well here. We have Ms. Tyshell S. Jones. Tyshell is the owner of 365 Days, 365 Chances Counseling Services. Mrs. Jones' personal choices led her toward a career of advocacy and service on behalf of the abused, neglected, and traumatized due to family violence. Her vast professional experience includes managing a safe shelter, court advocacy, serving as a liaison with law enforcement, and collaborating with other professional agencies to assist families affected by domestic violence. And we have also, and can you please pronounce your first name? I do not want to. Toyanne. Miss Toyanne, she's visiting us from Topeka, and I'm so excited that she's here today. Miss Toyanne Taylor is a clinician with 365 Days, 365 Chances Counseling Services. Ms. Toyanne provides supportive telehealth services for individuals, couples, and families. She has provided social services for over 30 years. In that time, she's met with individuals, families, during some of the most challenging times in their lives. Next, we have Dr. Chaz Maley. He has skill in working with diverse clients and presenting issues. Areas of professional interest for Dr. Maley include addiction concerns, helping veterans and military personnel readjust to civilian life, exploring PTSD symptoms, helping individuals manage race-related stress, men's issues, depression, anxiety, and managing interpersonal conflict. Dr. Maley is the co-owner of Manhattan Mental Health, and has been a licensed psychologist in the state of Kansas since 2012. We also have Ms. Jardine Coleman. She is the Director of Therapy Services at Pawnee Mental Health Services and a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist. Jardine has over 10 years of experience in mental health and public service as a former school board president in her community right here in Manhattan. Jardine's research interests are the intersection of public service and race, specifically how Black community leaders understand and experience leadership in predominantly white communities. And last but not least, we have Mr. Tyrone Townsend. He is the founder of Townsend Counseling and is a national certified counselor. He has over 10 years of experience as a first responder, where empathizing with individuals and families is of the utmost importance. Tyrone is a licensed professional counselor who works with adults who have ongoing challenges with depression and anxiety. So if y'all want to give a round of applause to our therapists and the important work that they do every day. And with that, we'll go ahead and dive into our questions for the panelists. We will have a little time at the end for questions, and definitely feel free to ask your questions. This is being recorded so that we can post this after the event. So we will go ahead and get started with that.
Yes, I like to say, I'm sorry, Alicia.
Wendy Nicholson is also in too.
Oh, sorry about that.
I will allow Ms. Wendy Nicholson to introduce herself because I haven't had the pleasure yet.
Oh, sure, thank you. Of course, my name is Wendy Nicholson, and I am the Executive Director of Student Health and Wellbeing Services right here at K-State. And been here about 3 months now from Memphis, Tennessee. And just have a blend of experience in public health and healthcare administration, so just delighted to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. It is important for us to recognize each other, so I appreciate that, Alicia.
And with that being said, we're going to get into the first question. What I would like to say is that I want to take the time to thank y'all for coming and being a part of this, this Black Joy Healing brunch discussion about navigating trauma and becoming your best self. So hopefully you enjoy and you're able to take some away with this today. So I'm going to get into the first question for the panelists. And the first question is a two-part question. How can we recognize the signs of trauma and racial trauma in our lives? How can we navigate and address the additional stressors and challenges of racism and discrimination in our personal and professional lives?
So I think some of the early signs of trauma were just sort of like how to recognize them in yourself that you want to pay attention to. A lot tends to happen in the body, just sort of this general sense feeling of tension. You might notice things like you're having trouble sleeping, heart rate seems to be kind of all over the place all the time, difficulty concentrating, focusing. You might notice even something that feels a little bit like paranoia, or maybe you're just a little bit irritable. You tend to snap at people and don't really understand why or what's going on.
Say something?
Now, something that I would add to this also in terms of trying to figure out how you're going to manage it is really understanding how much you can carry yourself so that you know when your balance is off. And when your balance is off, I always recommend doing a timeline. I think lots of times, especially women of color, are under the impression that they can carry and do everything all the time, all at once, and it just isn't so. That is crazy. So if you want to begin to use wisdom, you have to understand what you can carry, and when your balance feels off, going back and checking if you picked up some stuff that belongs to someone else, and then giving it back to them to manage for themselves. Sometimes you might find some things that you can let go of easily because it doesn't need to be a part of your rhythm and routine. But then there's some times when you're in the middle of something and you just got to see it through to the end. You know, maybe you have 3 or 4 months of it. So you look at what else you can rearrange to make it more manageable for you. But I think that that's part of how you recognize the trauma that's in your life. Things feel too heavy and you can't figure out why you can't carry it all.
So along with the kind of the first 2 examples, I really try to focus with my clients on I call it I don't call it, I got this from someone else, but decolonizing the body. So I think there's certain things that, talk about generational trauma, that we weren't responsible for. So specifically, I work with a lot of men, and one of the big things with men, and just in general, is vulnerability. And so, just like we said, having this protective mask on, because we have to do it. We have to protect ourselves a lot of times. And so coming to therapy in itself is vulnerable, but even amongst yourself, like if you journal, if you're talking to a best friend, recognizing your body, if that feeling of hurt, someone hurt you, someone said something, traumatic experiences, not pushing them down and just saying, well, you know, I deserve that to happen, or oh, tough luck, you know, things like that. I think the sayings make sense because they're trying to get us over something. It's resiliency in its core, but the foundation tends to be, there's still a lot of hurt, and time doesn't really solve it. We hear that all the time, like time eases it or fixes it, but it doesn't. People come 50, 60 years later and they're still dealing with trauma from when they were in high school and growing up in their parents' homes. So being vulnerable enough to decolonize your body, just like Dr. Chad said, you feel it first, recognizing the feeling, accepting it, not ignoring it. But I say it, but I'm telling you, it just takes a lot of vulnerability just to say, man, I felt hurt by what happened, and that's okay. So that's kind of like that first step. So.
I would definitely echo everything that's been said so far. And I would just add that I think it's important that we are okay with talking about these things out loud. Oftentimes we get accustomed to stuffing and pushing things down and pushing through, and really, you know, that is what contributes to our unwellness. And so it's important that you find people in your life that you can talk to. And thinking about this from a professional standpoint, if you work in a place where you work with or for other people, it's important that you stand up for yourself and that you speak up when something is racist or is a microaggression or is uncomfortable. I think it's easy for us to just brush it off and say, oh, you know, that's how people are, but times are changing, and we are in a moment where it's okay for you to speak up and call out behavior that is contributing to your mental unwellness. Did you add anything, Tasha?
I too echo everything they said. I do think it's important that we recognize and accept that our emotional, mental, and physical wellness all depend upon each other. Because when we're able to do that, then we'll go beyond the surface and we can get to the core. So adding to kind of what Jardine said, what I had listed on mine was basically we do need to set boundaries. You have to set boundaries in every relationship. It doesn't matter who it is, be that a family member, a friend, someone that you work with, because when we don't set boundaries, we're risking letting other people know how to treat us. And so with that, I think most importantly, we need to know our worth. We have to be selfish. You often hear, I know I've been taught, don't be selfish, but you have to be selfish, because if you don't advocate for yourself, who else is going to advocate for you? You always have to move with integrity, hold people accountable. We got to give less grace and stop giving so many passes, because I think sometimes when we do that, we're sitting here and we're trying to help everybody else, appease everyone else, but we're putting ourselves last. And so I think that's pretty much what I have to contribute.
That's wonderful.
Okay, yeah, with that being said, like for myself, being 42, I didn't understand or have any tools of what boundaries were. So I know how to survive, but I don't know how to thrive. So, going to therapy and learning these tools has really allowed me to advocate for myself, get in tune with my emotions without anger, and being able to express myself. So I thank y'all for that. All right. The next question. How can individuals use their experiences of trauma and racial trauma as a catalyst for growth, personal development, rather than allowing it to hold them back?
Okay, I'll start. I'm the oldest thing up here, I found out.
That don't matter.
I just need to let y'all know that. So I don't know how you all were raised, but in the time that I came up, right, we were told that we had to be twice as good to get half as much. Well, the generation that we're working with now is at a deficit. Number one, we've lost a couple of generations to drugs and other foolishness. And so the structure that we once had in our communities is not the same. I am a grandparent raising grandkids because the kid that I raised, life imploded. And I could have lost it and went after her for imploding. But my beloved said, girl, go get them kids so you can get the look on your face right, so we can get on with living, because I could not bear the thought that those kids would be lost. So with all of that being said, this is my answer to the question. We still have to be at our absolute best in the worst of circumstances. Are you going to be perfect at it every day? No, you are not going to be. But just because it exists, you are not excused from doing your best. That's the way we were taught. That's why you knew you had to double time it in order to get half the recognition, half of the salary, half of the benefit of it all, right? Yes. And our kids, our current generations don't get that, because they live in 30-second bites. And if things don't work out in that 30 seconds, then they move on to self-harm. If the right people don't like them, then, they're not worth anything. And that's what we have to turn around. Whether I'm looking at you or not, it is still expected for you to be your best. And no matter what you are up against, you still have to do your best. And at the end of the day, when you look back at situations that were hard for you, did you do your best with what you had at that time? Honestly. And that's all we're asking them to do. And that's all we're encouraging each other to do. Do your best, get some more tools, and keep moving.
First, I want to say I am a product of a grandmother who raised grandbabies, so thank you for doing that.
I don't know if they want to say thank you.
They will, future them will thank you. They absolutely will. It's a blessing. It's an absolute blessing, so thank you. I think this question is difficult because we opened up talking about the importance of not just pushing things down, but then this question kind of asks you, how do you pick up and keep going? And so this question was sort of hard for me to come up with an answer for. My advice would be to check in with yourself regularly and to use strategies like mindfulness and breathing to really be in tune with just how are you feeling in a situation so that you can have an informed decision about how you want to respond to a situation. A lot of times we just react when something happens. And so, it's important to be able to slow down, to allow yourself some grace for you, to just think about how you want to respond and react. And oftentimes, if you stop and pause, you can make better decisions. If you can remove yourself from a situation, you can dream up or think up new ways of responding or new ways of coping that maybe you didn't have access to before. Sort of related to that is just being open to different ways of coping and connecting. I talked about mindfulness, but also just movement in general and exercise and connecting with people, things like that. All of those things can help as just ways that you can give your body a rest and a break.
Thank you, Jordanie. And she mentioned something, she says slow down. So I don't know if you have a pen or paper, just can remember this acronym I tell clients, SLOW, just like she said. So S is for C, seeing what's going on from both perspectives. That reactivity sometimes is, whatever it is, they didn't talk to me that day. You're like, man, they must, and then your automatic thought goes, they don't like me. But maybe they lost their grandpa that day. I don't know, they lost their job, they had a bad day at work, whatever happened. So seeing things from both sides. That L is label that feeling that you have. Is it anger? Is it hurt? Is it whatever it is, right? It's something. And labeling it helps bring it from the internal part to external. So that helps us kind of put it out there. It's there, recognize it, know what it is. And that O is observe because our thinking affects our feelings and our feelings affect our behavior. And so if we can, whatever we're thinking affects our feelings and affects our behavior. So observe what's going on around you. What are you doing? How's your behavior changed? How's this person affecting you? Because that could make you have a bad day. Herb he didn't say hi to me today, so I don't like him now. Now I'm mean to everybody else and I'm projecting on everybody else. And then the W is the welcome. And that's welcome in that conversation to have. And that's part of what a lot of the panels have been talking about. Is if that does have a feeling, someone does make you upset, someone does cross your boundaries, like Ty said, before we get to the welcome, because sometimes if we're so emotionally, flooded, the welcome is going to come out angry, like Joel, what's up, man? You didn't say hi to me. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you isn't even, it's an accusation. I'm not even trying to figure out what's really wrong with me. So if you remember that slow, it helps, trust me. And it really helps in relationships too. For whoever here is married, trust me. So to stop that reactivity. So I found the same thing. This was difficult in a lot of ways. We just had this conversation out in the hallway when we were eating. Individuals use their experience of trauma and racial trauma. So one thing I try not to do is project. That's why I love that show Blackish that used to come on ABC. And Anthony Anderson's character is so interesting because I'm in a position now for my son. Let me see. How many black fathers in here? Okay, that's what's up. That's what's up. So I'm not discounting others. I'm just trying to come in from this perspective here. Is our worry about our black sons and daughters, especially my son is 7 now, and I'm constantly worried. I'm like, if I tell him, hey son, don't put your hoodie on in the store, am I projecting my own fears on him, and my own traumas from my childhood when the police officer pulled a gun on me, or am I just trying to protect him? So I think part of the question is, we don't want to project, but maybe kind of like with that SLOW acronym, we externalize it. Checking in on yourself, like Jordanie said, is this about me and my fears, or am I actually looking at this from an external point and talking to him about that? And so I think that's the first part you know, I try to recognize it. And don't shame yourself. It's not bad. We all gonna make mistakes, because that first part is we love our sons, we love our daughters, we want the best for them. But it's really checking yourself. Is this about you or is this about them? Is this your fear, or have you actually done the deep dive inside? And so the last thing I had was, trauma is what happens inside of you, is not what happens to you. So some of the men I have, and I see a lot of first responders, I'm a former first responder, man, tough guys, right? And so I'll list like 10 to 20 things of traumatic things just to see, does any of these affect you? Nah. I'm like, really? You saw somebody got shot? I'm good, no big deal. You saw this, you saw a dead body, you saw this, nothing. And so what it is like, some of it's a front, it's trying to protect ourselves, but I'm trying to pay attention to the feeling. And then I'll take that aside, because those are the events, and then I'll just label feelings: fear, scared, hurt, abandoned. And then they start circling them. And then we match them up. And they're like, oh, I was really feeling that. I'm like, yeah, and that's okay. And so I think part of it too is slowing down, using that slow method, recognizing what's inside of you and trying not to project that on someone else. And just, like I said, having some grace for yourself. So.
I do a lot of feelings work with my clients, because I think that we, all of us think we really understand feelings and emotions, but we really don't.
Thank you. I didn't even know at that time, because I ended up with a family member that, you know, I was, you know, harvesting anger. You know, I thought I was fine the whole time. But people, as I got older, started to realize that I would project out positivity, you know, but that wasn't the same thing I was giving to myself. So, you know, you gotta, you know, learn those things. So that's pretty dope and cool. So thank you for that. The next question, we was talking about mindfulness. How can we use mindfulness and other coping strategies to cultivate joy and relentlessness in the face of trauma and grief?
Okay, so for me, to be mindful means to be present. And so it's important that we don't ignore the past, and we don't act like it didn't happen and that we don't have concerns, but we also can't let it control our future, right? We have to be able to still keep going. And sometimes, like Toyin said, we have these hard times, but we have to look into ourselves and say, what coping skills and strengths did I use that helped me get through this? Yes, they may not be exactly the same, they may look similar, but what strengths and coping skills did I use? And sometimes we gotta shake them up. Like as if you had an imaginary treasure chest with a lanyard, you gotta shake them up, because you have to make these coping skills and strengths, it's in us already. We just have to shake them up so we can apply them to the situations at hand, because everything's not gonna look the same. And so we have to expand on those. I believe in using your resources. It makes no sense for all these resources to be available and we don't use them. Whether that be because you can't be humble, because you got too much pride, because such and such said that if you use this, then you're gonna get this, and it's gonna do this on your taxes. Whatever it takes, if there's a resource out there and you're not using it, then you're kind of creating your own trauma and drama. And so I believe in using all your resources to include your spirituality, create you a team, a support team, get you a mentor. This is my mentor right here. Sometimes she don't like to admit it, but she is. I check in with her a lot personally and professionally. And so you have to have a mentor. If you are in a position where you're trying to grow, find you a mentor. Be honest with yourselves. Know when to sit still. Know when to rest. And remember that everything is not absolute. And what you see in front of you does not mean that's it. So look beyond that, and that kind of goes with that pausing, because sometimes we will have an emotional response, which we won't get out of it what we want. And then don't chase what you can't control. Be rational with your thinking, but you got to stay on course. You have to define your own purpose so that you can gain your inner peace, and then you can cultivate your prosperity.
You know, one of the things that I was going to say, kind of going back to the other a little bit, is we can acknowledge our traumas. I think that's kind of the first step, is just sort of recognizing that maybe you have been traumatized by something, because I think we'll sometimes walk around and not even recognize what it is that's happening to us. But I think with mindfulness, it's like, yeah, finding those ways to be still, finding those ways to ground yourself. You know, sometimes it can be really hard, but it's like when you're sort of like reliving your trauma, right, you're sort of like ruminating on that, and that's really impacting the neural pathways that you have. And it's like, okay, can you pause, and can you find something else that you can ruminate on that actually brings you joy, that brings you stillness, that brings you peace, that brings you happiness? and, you know, sort of allow yourself to just really sort of like dive in and sort of like stay in that space for a while. And actually what it will do is it'll create new networks that you'll be able to access a lot easier moving forward. You know, find those things that for you like help to bring you balance. You know, one of the things that I'll talk to my clients about is like, okay, if you don't have a lot of energy to like go out for your stereotypical run, like what's something that you can do where the entry fee is relatively low, right? And if that means just like getting up, going and like taking a shower because you haven't, you know, gotten out of bed in several days, you know, that's what you do. If you journal, you know, do that. Call someone, find the people who are supportive, that are part of your network, where you can feel like you can actually be vulnerable and just sort of allow yourself to experience all those things. And then also be okay with sometimes like we just don't have a lot of strength, and if you need to break down for like a few minutes, an hour, you need a closet, go crying, you know, you go do that. You know, you don't stop yourself from feeling whatever it is that you feel is going to come up for you.
I'd just like to say a little thing about grief. Grief is real, and whether we want to admit it or not, sometimes we can even have good things happen to us and have to grieve some things, because things have changed. They're not what they used to be. You know, we're going to have to make some adjustments to be able to move forward with it, and so on and so forth. One of the best illustrations of grief that I have seen is a illustration that has 3 jars. One is small, one is medium, one is large. Grief remains the same size, but the jar being our life, gets bigger and bigger as we allow other things to come in and fill up the space. We still miss what we had. We still carry that with us. And I didn't have a master's degree in social work or a license or any of that the first time I heard this. It was my great auntie that told me, you will always miss them. And she had been missing her mom longer than I had been alive. So I'm not just making it up and it wasn't in a book somewhere. This is the reality of living. You will always miss some things, but as you add more things to your life, you will regain joy.
I wanted to share a resource with you all. I was walking around Barnes & Noble last week, killing some time before dinner with friends, and I found this book called Black People Breathe by Z. Clark, Z-E-E, Clark with an E. And the subtitle is A Mindfulness Guide to Racial Healing. And I didn't even know I needed that book until I walked past it in the store. And I'm just a couple of pages in so far, and this author does a phenomenal job of connecting the need for mindfulness and breath work to our experiences as Black Americans. She talks a lot about how even though mindfulness originated in a totally different culture, that it really was made for us, because we have so much that we're carrying around as a people. So much historical trauma that we carry as a people, and that this mindfulness and breath work really is meant for us to slow down and to be more in tune with how those things are impacting us today. She gives you lots of practical exercises for how to do different breathing exercises and things like that. So I highly recommend this book. I'm only halfway through chapter 1, and I know it's going to be an excellent read. So I would definitely encourage you, if you're interested in mindfulness, or learning how to tune in with yourself, to check out that book.
Okay. Thanks, Jordan. I wish I had my research. I have a journal that I pass out, but I can't remember what. So I'll get that later. They really talked about, this panel talk about mindfulness and the techniques and things that they've seen work that are practical. So I want to share just my experience. And a lot of times it ends up being, there's a big resistance with mindfulness, because what did Dr. Chaz and a few other ones said? They said you have to be present. So to be present sometimes is the fear of, man, especially from my parents, I gotta worry about this, I gotta worry about that, worry about that. Sometimes we're the last ones we worry about. Like, I mean, I have 3 kids. It's like boom, 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 and I'm like, did I even eat today? Did I even do anything? And I know that's part of just being a parent, but that's also part of the problem. And then you work 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. So then it's like, am I allowed to be present? Yes, you're allowed to be present. You're allowed to be still. So some of the work I do is resistance work. before we even get there, I'm trying to teach my clients to allow themselves to even get to being mindful. And so we will talk about what are the worries. If I don't get this done today, what's the worst that'll happen? You know, if I don't do this expectation, what's the worst that'll happen? How do you feel about yourself? Just asking men, like, hey, it's so funny. Like, hey, do you ever say you love yourself? No. It's the weirdest thing, but we don't allow ourselves to even do that. And so how can we even get to the part where, you know, if I just throw a worksheet and say, hey, go meditate, this is not gonna do anything. And so working with that resistance piece, loving ourselves again enough to say it's okay for us to allow ourselves to be present and allow ourselves that moment to just think about us and to reflect on what we have going on. So.
I want to throw a couple of resources out there really quickly. Thanks, Trini, because this is a few that I've been sharing with, and actually I use these to work with some of my clients. I run into a lot of Black women who have experienced or currently experiencing racial workplace trauma. And it's one of those things that's really real, and it's one of the reasons that I went full-time private practice, because there comes a point in time as you grow and experience things, some things you have to be less tolerable with, and you have to recognize that it is hitting you a little differently. And so one of the books that I reference is called Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen, The Emotional Lives of Black Women, and it's by Inger, I-N-G-E-R, Burnett, hyphen Ziegler, I think, Z-E-I-G-L-E-R. So I really don't have a lot of time to read, so I do a lot of audibles. But then I have the other two that I'm reading one now, and the one that I have read. I have a little cousin that just graduated with her bachelor's, and that's what I actually gave her for her one of her gifts. Sorry guys, I gotta find my notes. And her name is Minda Harts, and so her first book is called The Memo, and so Minda, M-I-N-D-A, and then last name is H-A-R-T, and it's The Memo, and I actually had it on Audible. I think I shared it with my oldest daughter, Tasia. I know I sent it to Toyanne, and she told me she couldn't think she could listen to it because it sounded like my story, because I've been through some things with this corporate world out there and in the racial workplace trauma. And so it actually, when I was reading, I was like, I could have wrote this book. And so it resonated a lot with me. And then she came with a second one called The Right Within. And so that's what I'm listening to now. And it's just basically one of those things that I feel like anybody, especially Black women, as you are navigating your professional world, this will be something that you need to use, because it's hard to recognize, like someone's mentioned microaggressions, and sometimes it's just like, this can't be true. Like, I know this did happen, but in reality it did. And so there's a lot of times in my younger days, before I got my independent license, I shucked and jived, but then there came a point in time where I was no longer tolerable. And so it was kind of one of those things where I might have to start working for myself, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay employed. So those are some resources for you to use if you ever like to read or something like that.
Again, y'all see the wisdom and the resources that are here available to you. How many of y'all knew that there were this many Black therapists in Manhattan? Yeah, see? Okay, and this is not even all of our Black therapists in our area. This is just a portion of the Black therapists here. So definitely that's part of this event, is for the awareness piece. So let's get into the next question. We were kind of we touched on this a little bit earlier about just the trauma that we experience as people when it comes to race, and seeing our people be killed literally on social media, and not even having a warning, and just scrolling through on social media and seeing another traumatic thing. I think about Ralph Yarl, and that was so emotional for me as a mother with Black sons. And seeing Ralph, I saw my son Trey. When I seen him laying in that bed, hospital bed, I seen my son Trey. And as Black mothers, we have that level of grief sometimes and trauma that we carry around, and it's good to know that there are people that can help you through that and help you process that as well. And so we're not up here talking about this. We believe in therapy ourselves. This was actually Jermaine's idea to start this program, and it started as a virtual panel last year, and then bringing it in person this year. And even in our marriage, we thought that our marriage was the problem until we realized that it was us individually needing to heal ourselves and the trauma that we were had experienced before we came into our marriage in order for us to build a strong family unit. Because you know, as Black families, people don't want to see it work out. You know, there are not a lot of examples of that. And so before I get on that, let's get into this next question, y'all. So we want to talk about vicarious grief, and this is something that Dr. Maley brought up on a virtual panel discussion. And when I brought up the Ralph Yarl, you know, we can go down, there's so many names that we could say, and you all will know the story and the situation behind that. But when it comes to the grief that we feel when we see a Ralph Yarl or another situation like that, that is what it's called, is vicarious grief, and we're literally feeling the grief even though we don't know the person, because it impacts us because they look like us. And so the question is how can individuals cope with emotions and trauma that come from experiencing repeated exposure to traumatic violence, and vicarious grief from racially motivated shootings that are in the news?
I can start. My advice, I think, is going to be probably short and sweet. I am a proponent of avoiding at all costs taking in the violence that we see against us. I think it's probably been at least 3 or 4 years since I figured out how to adjust my social media settings so videos don't automatically start playing when I scroll past, because I know that I can't take that in. And for me, that's because I know I don't have the mental capacity to see us dying. I don't want that. And I'm thankful that I have a support system at home to talk about those things. But for me, I think this is one where avoidance is a key strategy. Another thing I would say is if you are experiencing the things we've been talking about in terms of the signs and symptoms of trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder, go to therapy. We haven't really said that yet, but it's okay. Like, you know, it's us, it's people in your community, it's people you can break bread with. We are regular people, and we want to help, and we want to create, you know, a safe place for you to come in and to talk about how difficult these things are, because we all do understand. So don't be afraid to find a therapist. And if you don't want to see any of us because you feel like you know us really well, if you have health insurance, you can go on your health insurance website and find a provider. You can find a therapist that looks like you. Therapy for Black Girls is a whole website full of Black providers who want to help, who you can, if you don't want to use your insurance or you don't have it, a lot of them you can pay out of pocket for. So don't be afraid to reach out, to use the supports. I think Tyshell said this earlier, to use the supports that not only we are offering, but that clinicians of color are offering all across the United States.
I agree with her. I tend to not watch things. There's actual movies I have never seen because I have, I consider myself, I picked this up. Why do you want to know when I graduated from college?
I didn't ask you.
I did not. In the early 90s, when I graduated from school, one of the things that I learned in a drug and alcohol class was that I am paranoid by culture. That's always been my stance, and I don't make excuses for it. Because if I'm going to survive, I have to be aware of some of this stuff. And I need to know when to move and when not to move and all of that. If you're dealing with someone that has post-traumatic stress and you catch them at the wrong time, your body tells you to be still. You will not move till they move, till you know that they're back in the here and now, right? You'll just stand there and wait for them to recognize who you are, because one wrong move could be a disaster for both of you, right? So I'm married to John Hyman. He's also a therapist, and he's the love of my life. He is my beloved. John watches all that stuff. We got one TV. One TV, and I'm trying to figure out, man, how we gonna watch all this? We can't watch all this. I gotta go to work in the morning. Because when I hear it, for me, I don't want to just cry. I hear the drum beat of revolution. And so he's watching and he's working through his feelings, and then I'm in the back saying, revolution, revolution. I can hear it. And I'm thinking, well, it's time to go. Y'all want to roll out now, right? And so that is the struggle for me, because I still have to be professional to maintain the career that I built, because I want to retire, and I'm not going to let those people have that retirement money just yet. I got to figure this out. And so I had to cut myself off from some of that. But we are raising 2 grandsons and a nephew. Carmel and Brown. And I worry about those things. But I learned with my son, when I was busy trying to protect him from all of this, I didn't give him the skills to withstand it. And so for me, my time is better spent in you knowing what character is, and you trying to develop your own character. Because I can tell you, we don't lie, we don't steal, we clean up, we do this, we do that. And if you raise kids, they don't do none of that. You know what I'm saying? You training them. Sometimes you see the glimpse of hope, but when they're not with you, you know, when you get the report back that they are doing those things, then you say my life's energy is well spent, right? And so for me, the thing is I've got to give you what you need on the inside to withstand this, because I can't stop it. How many years? How many years have you seen a thing change? Well, I'd say in the last 5 years you have, because now some of the police have gone to jail. But there is a current case out there where the man strangled the mental health man on the train in New York City, and they are trying to justify that on behalf of this person who's a good person who just went too far. But there was no threat. He just said he was tired of being hungry. Now, how many folks on there had a sandwich and could have gave it to him versus putting him in a chokehold? So I can't watch all that, because I go too far with it, and then my drum beats move. But my husband, a black man, who, you know, I'm like, look, dude, I need you to use your turning signal. I got PTSD if the red lights go off behind us. And he's like, I'm an old man. I'm just out here driving. But he works through it a total different way than I do. And he's more at risk than I am.
That's good.
So, I think when I spoke here, this is a February, Brandon Clark is back there, but it was for IMTO. I touched on that, and this was right after Tyree Nichols shooting, death, and so it was, and I think one of my slides was just, you don't have to watch the video. And so many times like, we feel like we have to do this, or this obligation or whatever, and then it's feeling, again, remember thinking, feeling, and then actions. It's like, man, I'm supposed to do this, and then I watch it, but I feel bad. So earlier, I wasn't trying to be sneaky or deceiving. Yeah, I'm a first responder, but I'm also law enforcement. Prior law enforcement. So I was a cop here at RCPD for 9 years, and then I was a correction officer for 2 years in Kansas City. And what I mean is the vicarious trauma. If you're an individual, you have control over a lot of this, where the EMS, the social worker, the cop, the firefighter, they may not. And so you don't have to watch the video. You don't have to feel obligated to do all those things. You can still fight the cause and advocate within your boundaries, because setting up boundaries is not just for everybody else, it's for yourself as well. So.
Dr. Maley, do you want to speak on that vicarious grief? I got it from you, so.
Well, I was just going to echo what other people said about disconnecting. You know, doom scrolling is a real thing. You get in, you see something, and then you just sort of immerse yourself in whatever the events were, all that was happening around it. The pain that comes along with just like the immense amount of like injustice that takes place, right? Yeah, like this gentleman that choked out the man on the train station, right? Like a couple $1 million got put into this legal defense fund, and you see, you hear, you know those experiences, you know what a lot of people just sort of like think about you and think about your, you know, if you have this unfortunate passing, right, like how is it going to be framed? Like you just can't go out and do normal things, and then you start carrying around this sort of like fear and sort of like terror with you a lot. And so yeah, one of the big things is just like disconnect. If there's something that happens, I know enough to be informed, and then I kind of move on, in particular because it's something that might come up when I'm, you know, working with a client. Have a supportive community around you that like speaks a common language, that knows what it is that you're sort of like going through internally. You know, I think back to when Jordan Davis was murdered, you know, for listening to loud music, right? It's like how many times you with your friends, you're doing something similar, you're just kind of like hanging out, and then your whole world like comes apart. And just the knots that people will turn themselves into to sort of justify, you know, the murder of someone that looks like you. And so it's like, yeah, I just have to tune those things out. Again, I'm aware of them, but I create good space. You know, I spend time with my family, I spend time with the people that, you know, will understand those experiences. And then when I'm feeling kind of like ready and I can kind of go back in, and it's like, yeah, but most of the time I actually just don't really follow a lot of news, and that just helps me out quite a bit.
And so then lastly, I just say use your wisdom. I concur with most everything you all said. Know who you are. If you're not built for it, you're not built for it. You don't have to watch it because such and such said they watched it or whatever the case may be. It's no different. If you don't like horror movies, you wouldn't watch horror movies, right? And then know that grief and trauma are real. I think we hear a lot of buzzwords as mental health professionals that people just think and jump and run to, and then all of a sudden everybody knows how to diagnose, but it's real, right? And so just know that we all experience it differently. And you know, even as a therapist, there's not, I don't want too many clients on my caseload when it's, you know, if it's real heavy. For an example, my aunt and Connie, she's our administrative coordinator, and we are credentialed differently, you know, as far as with different insurance panels, and she was trying to figure out where this client was gonna go, and it ended up with me, and I was like, well, I don't want her. I got enough of that on my caseload right now. And she asked me, doesn't it feel good to say you don't? And I said, no. Yeah, it does feel good, and we'll help her find someone else, but I just don't want her right now. I got enough of those on my caseload. And so I knew that, again, my bandwidth wasn't there. It was too, I had already enough of dealing with that. And I think it was racial workplace trauma, basically. I have enough of those on my caseload, and I'm still trying to heal through mine. So, like he said, use your resources. Friends, family, church family, mentor, therapist, and just don't isolate yourself. Right. Know that you aren't going to be able to talk to everybody about some of these things, and then also use wisdom, because this might help you start cutting some people out, because there's some lenses that if people are looking through, there's no way that you guys can be seen if they're looking through something and they see it right.
That's really good. So we're going to close really the panel with a final question, as well as take maybe 3 questions from the audience, just to be respectful of time, because I know we're over. This has been good conversation though. Yeah. So one of the questions here, and we're Black entrepreneurs here in the room, that is our mission as an organization, is to empower, equip, and engage Black entrepreneurs in our community. And even myself, when we're talking about processing through that grief and that trauma, part of how we've processed racial trauma that we've experienced in the workplace, and it didn't go away when I became an entrepreneur. I thought that when I left the workplace that I would be able to create my own cocoon and everything would be exactly how I wanted. Now, I do have a team that I can create our own company culture within my team. However, it still happens. It's the racial trauma still happens as an entrepreneur. I've been in so many situations, y'all can relate, where I've had somebody refer me to a client. I show up and now all of a sudden they don't need the help. They don't need the assistance anymore. I've shown up to places that are for lease in this city, and when I show up, now all of a sudden it's not for lease anymore. I mean, these things still happen in our community, and so that is why we started this organization, so we could channel some of that, and not just either one, leave the community, because these things happen everywhere. It's not just Manhattan, it's not just Kansas, these things happen everywhere. So getting to this last question here, we wanted to see about a couple of tips, maybe each panelist end with a tip that can, tip or advice for Black entrepreneurs, but in this case also Black professionals, and how we can prioritize our mental health.
I'd say just stay committed to yourself and investing in yourself. So for me, that looks like your mental, emotional wellness. Staying committed to that. Be that, like I said, use your resources. Jordan said it best. Go to therapy. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you have it there for you. You can go to psychologytoday.com. She named a few. Here in Manhattan, we have MHK Mental Health Providers.org, maybe? Providers.org. And some of these websites, you literally can filter it. You're filtering down to almost to the T of what you're looking for, whether that be faith, whether that be male, female, race, what kind of training, sometimes even certificate, things like that. And so use your resources, stay committed to yourself. Your emotional and mental wellness depends upon you, and you deserve to also have that access.
If you fall down, who's gonna pick it up for you? So then you have to make sure your cup is full, or at least not bone dry, so that you can keep moving. Because I'm not gonna come over there and do what you're doing for you. So you're gonna need to do that. Think of it that way. If I fall down, who's gonna do this? Figure out what you need to keep in case you want to fall down. Figure out what you need to let go of so you don't fall down. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think therapy is definitely useful if you're trying to navigate through some things. For me personally, in addition to disconnecting, I have to move. So I'll go for walks a lot. I'll try and exercise, just things that I can do to help clear my mind. I do try and spend time with people that bring positive energy to me. If you have sort of these emotional vampires in your life and they're sort of there voluntarily, be okay with saying that they maybe get put into a different space where they're not really in your world all that much anymore.
That's hilarious. Emotional vampires. I love that. I'm taking that with me. And so I thought of two things. The first thing was as a business owner, I think, I'm not a business owner, but I can imagine that as the first two folks shared, that you're doing all of these things yourself. And the important thing is to build in time to do the things that Chaz is talking about. To make sure that you have time to just relax, to sit back and enjoy and celebrate what you've built, because that is a huge accomplishment. Building in time for rest and rejuvenation to make sure your cup's not empty. The other piece of advice I have is community. That's something that as a Black professional that is so important to me. So I'm the director at Pawnee Mental Health, and I'm the only person on the management team that is not white. And so it's important for me that outside of the 60 hours a week that I spend doing work stuff around white people, that I have spaces where I'm around Black people, and that I can talk about stuff like this with them and they understand what I'm talking about. And I have a group of girlfriends that we just celebrated our 8th year of getting together on an almost monthly basis to just connect, to share the struggles that we're having. They all happen to be therapists too, so that's helpful. But to share just the struggles of what it means to be a Black professional, to work in our communities, and it's hard, and it's stuff that's unique to our experiences. And so for me, community is key to success.
I probably it's the same thing that a lot of people have said, boundaries, and because it's something that you can control. Sometimes therapy, I would want people to go to therapy more, but sometimes, there's, and one of the questions we get to is even access for us, for African American people of color, to therapy, whether it's money, insurance, driving there. I mean, I know we have telehealth now, but some people may not have internet, all kind of issues, right? But again, that's an external thing that you may not be able to control. Boundaries is something you can control and being okay. And there's a grade here to put one out there for you. Nedra Tawwab is, she's excellent on boundaries. She's came out with her second book, Drama Free, African-American clinician. And she's just awesome. I follow her on all her social media platforms. And it just really made it, for me, when I read her books, I use her workbook as well, it just made it feel okay to set boundaries. I think even as a kid, it was just like taught, like, you know, kids are to be seen, not heard, just, you know, you kind of learn those things. I mean, some of it may be useful, but you just learn as a kid, okay, I should just let people just invade my space and do these things. But as adults, especially as business owners, you have to do that. And I'm kind of with Ty on that is, people, there's not a lot of black clinicians. I mean, there's more, like Sheila said, but there's not a lot, especially males. I don't even know who else is just you and I.
I think it's just.
us. So the point is,
Tyrone, this brother right here is also.
so three, yes, right. But you speak, yeah. So there's more, and then there's more in Lawrence too.
Yeah.
So speaking of Lawrence, so I'll get referral after referral, which is great, and I'll get, you know, a mother like, hey, my 17-year-old son, and I saw you, you know. Maybe Chaz is full or the insurance don't work out, and my immediate feeling is, man, I feel bad. And I'm looking at my caseload, I'm like, wow, I just can't do it. Because actually I would be doing them a disservice. You ever see those movies with the lawyer who's was it paid by the courts, and the person shows up and he has like a notebook, he's like, who are you? And he has a whole bunch of folders. You don't want that, right? Like, I don't want to have 50 people a week, and you show up, I don't even remember your name, you know? So sometimes it sounds mean, but you have to set those boundaries, right? Because we only have so much capacity that we can withstand, so.
That's good.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. Let's give our clinicians here a round of applause.
Brother here, if they can just stand so they'll know that there's other therapists here.
Okay. Okay, I think if there are any other black therapists or clinicians in the room, if you would stand. Okay, all right. People of color.
We have 2 more clinicians here from 365. We have Hispanic Jessica, she's a person of color, and we have Latanya Butler
Yes.
Palmer, sorry, and she's one of our clinicians as well.
Yes, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So y'all saw, you know, that there is support of people of color that are mental health therapists and experts in our town, in our city, in our region. So at this time, I wanted to open it up for 3 questions. So whoever wants to go first, I'll bring the microphone over to you. All right now, Ms. Teresa.
No, don't give her.
I was about to say.
I am going to act like I have home training today.
Thank you.
And I am going to stay in the pocket of the topic. So, and I'm asking this question because I had a student that came and was in my office a couple of weeks ago, and we were supposed to be there for a resume review, but a whole bunch of stuff that came out. And this student specifically was dealing with unresolved trauma, some trauma that happened within the family, and this student, because I was like, well, you might want to try to talk and maybe communicate as a safe space for you to talk, and this student does not even have an option to resolve this trauma. So like, what? I didn't know what to do with that. So then I was just like, so when it comes to unresolved trauma, like how are people supposed to work through that? How do they get to a place of peace if they, that maybe there's somebody that did them wrong? Because this student has somebody in the family that did some egregiousness to them growing up. That person, the person that did it is now dead, and the parent that kind of enabled the behavior now has some dementia, and they can't talk about it. So I didn't have nothing for it. I was like,
So we usually have a couple of ways that we feel like things will be resolved. So, what's your first choice, right? Okay, that's not going to work out. So with that not being an option, what is the next thing that would give you some relief from this? We all have to have more than one plan to get through this life. Am I right or wrong? You got to have a plan A. This is what I always tell people. You got to have plan A, a plan B, and be swift enough in transition to come up with another plan in motion, right? And so that would have been my question to that young lady, because even if these people were alive and said, I'm sorry, that wouldn't resolve that pain. And so the question becomes, absent of that, what is the next thing that you could accept? I also think, and I didn't get a chance to say this, sometimes when we have been traumatized or been in hard places, we learn a certain skill. And then when we move beyond that, we take that same skill with us, but we don't need to use it the same way. And we got to learn when to transition between our skill sets. There's sometimes you do need a John Henry sledgehammer to help people understand, don't cross this line. And then there's other times when you can say, I'm sorry, I'm done with this, I appreciate you, and move on. But we have to know when to do that. And if we take the wrong set of skills into the wrong situation, we'll be worse off for it.
Anyone else? Okay.
Actually, I don't really have a question.
No, we want to answer your question.
But I'm a content creator, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Right.
And I was just wondering, because this is such an incredible event, if I can make a quick video with all of these beautiful Black and brown people in this room to celebrate self-care is healthcare. So I was just wondering, is that okay? I got an audience of about 250,000 people that need to see and hear this. And so I was just saying that was okay to celebrate this moment?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let's go.
Can we get Alicia's question? Yeah, absolutely.
We're rapid with yours.
Okay, I'm asking because my daughter is a little shy. She graduated from K-State last Saturday. With honors, and she's going into grad school at K-State to study to be get her master's in marriage and family therapy. What advice would you give to her? Because I do worry about her going into the field and knowing that you have to have your mind right, so you don't internalize a lot of the trauma that you're going to be experiencing dealing with clients. What advice would you have to a young person who is going into this field?
I would just say stay the course and know what's for you. Don't compare yourself to others, because comparison is the thief of joy. So many different, we are all different clinicians. We have different credentials, some of us, and so even when you're going for your MFT or your LMFT, at the end of it all, don't compare yourself to others. Find your path, and stay in your lane, and then you're not. It's not a race, right? It's for you, and use your resources, use your community.
Know your boundaries, and don't let other people define you. You get this information that I always tell families when I work with them, I'm going to tell you something now. If it works for you, take it. If it's not for you, spit it out. We find something else. Okay?
Effective compartmentalization was something that I learned early on, was very helpful, because I worked in child adolescent, kind of like my first experience. That was really challenging. I was losing a lot of sleep, and I had to find a way of kind of like setting those things down and then coming back and picking them up when I walked into the office the next day.
I'm a graduate of that program, so we definitely need to connect after this. Good luck. That's so exciting to hear.
Congratulations.
Community. I think finding faculty that you trust in that department or in family studies, so somebody that you can go to just unload, who will understand what you're going through, and don't be afraid to speak up and ask for what you want. Graduate school it's a school, it's adults, so you got to speak up and ask for what you want, and people will respond to that because you are paying them to teach you what you need to know.
Hey, you stole mine. Speak up. Yeah. It's a great video. Congratulations, by the way. Again, there's a great video on YouTube. That's a big accomplishment. I say that because if you look young, I don't know you, but for me it wasn't, I didn't transition right from undergrad to grad school. I went into the Army, workforce, and then I went to grad school as older, married. So, but which presents its own challenges. But that, I just don't know if I could ever do that. I don't think I was ready. I'm super impressed. But speak up for yourself. And there's a great video on YouTube, I think it's Dr. Love's Black professor at Harvard, office hours. I don't know if anybody ever saw that, but he talks about the big kind of key thing between our community, African American community, and others, where speaking up, to not know that you can go and you can ask these professors, like, hey, I need help with this. Office hours, huge. And they did a detailed report on the ones who actually had office hours and their GPA and their, not just that, their success in getting internships and jobs versus the ones who didn't say anything. And sometimes we were taught to do that. We're just kind of keep our head down, keep the peace, get through it, just be thankful you're in grad school. No. Speak up. Speak up, speak up, speak out. You'll go through and you'll find us later. You'll have your clinical supervisor, supervision. You'll have all these things that are tools that you'll have already, but there's so much more, and don't be afraid to ask for it. So good luck.